this is just the beginning.
Welcome to this Axios virtual event. I'm Mike Allen, a co-founder of Axios. Welcome to my home in Arlington, Virginia. I'm looking out my window, the Key Bridge, into Georgetown. This is the second of two events that we're doing with Microsoft on the future of employability during the Republican National Convention. We thank Microsoft for making these conversations possible. And we thank you for taking a break during this busy, newsy week to join us on Axios.com, to join us on at Axios on Twitter with hashtag Axios, events on Facebook and on YouTube. Our first guest, Dr. Frank Luntz, is someone whose advice is craved by corporations, candidates, and office holders on every continent. I've been to conferences, seminars. He's extremely popular. He's well known for his international bestseller, Words That Work. Frank Luntz, thank you for joining Axios.
Mike, it's an honor. It's a pleasure. And what we're going to talk about really does matter.
Well, thank you. Getting the Axios lingo there. This is one of the great serendipities. You and I were talking, and it turned out you've done some real intense research on our exact topic today, which is the importance of broadband, the importance of tech in lifelong learning. And one of the ways that you think about it is getting people to think about the difference between a job and a career.
We did a project, a major national project for Working Nation. And that organization is devoted, really focused on making a difference in teaching workers that they have to be skilled, they have to be trained for the careers of the future. And I think what makes Working Nation different is that it is completely nonpartisan, as is the issue. Whether you're talking about broadband for young people to get them started on the information superhighway, or you're talking about lifelong learning, which adults appreciate and are beginning to not only understand, but embrace, that this is not a political issue. This is not a partisan issue. And this is not based on income or education, that any worker at any time could lose their job because of automation or because of globalization or outsourcing, and that you have to be prepared, and that elected officials on the federal and state and local level have a responsibility to provide these programs so that people do and are able to make a difference in their lives. And you mentioned the difference between job and career, and I don't know if you've got that statistic in front of you, but it's one of the great findings of the Working Nation survey. The idea that we think we have a job by 50 to 45%, but what we really want by 3 to 1 is a career. A job is something you go to from 9 to 5. A career is something you do 24/7. A job is something you're looking for the next one. A career is something that you love and embrace, and you want to stay with it.
Frank, one thing that you've done is talk to people about the difference between the good life and the American dream. What's the distinction people make there, and how does access to broadband, future education play into that?
Well, it's one of the reasons why this conversation is so timely. The consequence of COVID-19 is that there's been so much job and career dislocation, that people are not working in the office anymore, that some people who thought they'd be protected have not been. And to me, the importance is about planning. It's about knowing that you can't, it's knowing the unknown, as Donald Rumsfeld used to say. And the Working Nation study is designed to help policymakers, designed to help businesses together, working together to ensure that we are prepared for any contingency, so that young people have access to broadband so they can do their learnings, they can follow the lessons, they can read what they need to read and learn what they need to know to be competitive and to be prepared for college, career, and life. And that working adults are prepared for any eventuality, and that they actually embrace the future. And I think that's important. This is not a challenge for today at the Republican convention. This is a challenge forevermore. And it's with the Republicans, Democrats, Independents, whether you live in a rural community or the most urban of communities. These are things that affect all of us.
Frank, your second slide looks at the fact that for those who don't have the right training, there could be some real serious unemployment based on outsourcing and automation. And what's interesting is people really don't know who to blame, right? Just sort of walk us through your findings there.
It's interesting to me that while globalization is one of the most discussed and polarizing issues, and both sides, both Republicans and Democrats, try to turn it into an issue. What we learned from the Working Nation poll is that automation was a greater concern and outsourcing is number one. And we see this, we've become a global economy, that there are some jobs and careers that are just simply easier to outsource, easier to fill in a global environment. But that is no excuse for not getting the skills training, for not getting the lifelong learning. And one of the aspects that is so essential is that politicians need to know the language that the public will respond to. And businesses need to provide those opportunities that the politicians and the government cannot do. And Mike, I want to emphasize that this is not just an issue nationwide. Governors have a role to play. Mayors have a role to play. And in the end, individuals themselves have a responsibility to get the skills they need for the careers that they want.
Now, Frank, this is the most exciting part, the most interesting, juicy part. On this topic, what are the words that work and what are the words that bomb? How should companies, public officials, leaders be talking about this?
Well, that's where the good life comes in. To a lot of people, the American dream is just that, a dream. But the good life has a different definition to it. For some people, it's a Sam Adams on the weekend. For other people, it's the right car or the right holiday. But what always matters is the idea that through systems like we have right now, through online training, through person-to-person skills providing, through conversations like you and I are having right now, that provides the basics for what we need to learn and what we want to know. And the idea that lifelong learning beats every other phrase for describing what this process is. And I'm eager that we teach young people that high school is just a step towards college or towards career training. And once you graduate from college, that's just a step towards the first job you have. And once you have that job, that's just the stepping stone to the career that you want. That this is a seamless progression, and that we realize that no matter what decade we're in, and I'm in my 50s, that I still have things to learn, I still have skills to enjoy, and that whatever job or career I have right now may be radically different than what I have in the future, but that's okay. In fact, we should embrace it. Working Nation is working with Republicans and Democrats, working with Congress, mayors, and governors to ensure that we have a different mindset. And that's why I'm so grateful to be on this call that Microsoft sponsored, because they're a great example of a company that is deeply involved in making a difference for their workforce so that they will be more successful for the long term.
And Frank, as we say goodbye, you've been going to White Houses more times than you could ever count. But at the end of the Republican National Convention, you're going to be there at the White House for President Trump's acceptance speech. What are you going to be listening for? What should we be watching for?
Well, I'm a journalist in addition to being a practitioner and a pollster. And it was important to me that my Twitter followers embrace this. So I asked them yesterday, 7,500 interviews, more than 7,500. 68% said go, 32% say no. So I got on a plane last night. I'm here in Washington right now. And I want to see if Donald Trump learns anything from Melania Trump's speech. It was very highly regarded by the left and the right. CNN embraced what she had to say and how she said it, because she showed heart. She expressed her condolences and her sympathies for those who have suffered with or even lost their lives because of COVID. We all know that Donald Trump is tough. The question is, how big is his heart? And I'm going to be listening for whether he demonstrates empathy tonight rather than just strength tonight.
Frank Luntz, thank you for those words that work. Your Twitter feed at Frank Luntz is an awesome place to follow the convention. Frank Luntz, thank you for joining Axios.
Mac Allen, it was an honor.
We'd like to thank Microsoft for making these conversations possible. Our next guest is Brad Smith, the president of Microsoft. He's the chief legal officer. He has an empire of 1,400 people in 56 countries. He's got big ideas. Guy, Brad Smith, welcome to Axios.
Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, Brad, it says you're in Redmond, Washington. You're supposed to be in Charlotte with me. Quite a change in the plans for the convention. And I know that you have been at like many recent conventions, and Microsoft and technology have really played quite a role for both parties' conventions.
Well, I think these conventions play such an important role in American politics. Really, they're part of our culture. They've been a fundamental part of our history. If you just think about what happened in Chicago in 1860 when the Republican Party surprised everyone by nominating Abraham Lincoln. Over the last 20 years, technology has played a vital role. They've made the conventions more accessible to the American public. They've made so many of these things more interactive. It's why I was in Tampa in 2012, in Cleveland in 2016. We've been playing an important role in supporting the conventions. I had hoped to be in Charlotte this week.
So, Brad, since I didn't have to travel, I had a little extra time. So I curled up with a book. I curled up with this book. It's a great book. I recommend it, Tools and Weapons. This, of course, is Brad's book. And in there, you write about rural broadband. And Brad, you talk about rural broadband as the electricity of the 21st century. Do tell.
Well, first of all, I think it's right to think about broadband as the electricity of our age. If you want to use a telehealth service, you need broadband. If you want to take a community college course online, you need broadband. If you're a small business and you want to grow and you want to create jobs, frankly, you've got to be in a place that has access to broadband. But in so many of our rural communities in the United States today, that is missing. We have to close the broadband gap. It's why we are really passionate about it, perhaps especially in the rural parts of our country, because I think without this, we're just going to miss out on the opportunity to create the opportunities for people that they deserve.
And Brad, I think that we have a picture of a truck showing some of the work that's being done in the field, showing some of the ways the technology is being pioneered. Tell us about this fancy truck.
Well, this captures a visit to one of our favorite places. Carol Ann Brown, my co-author, and I, we both work at Microsoft, and this is in Ferry County in northeastern Washington state. It's like a number of really beautiful parts of the United States. It is more rural. There is no broadband, or I should say there was no broadband until Microsoft worked with partners. And specifically that truck, I think it sort of reflects the best of American ingenuity. We provided a grant, but the person who put that truck together is one of the 3 county commissioners in Ferry County. And he used it to drive around and literally test whether he could get a good connection with the TV white spaces technology that we have been helping to advance. This is basically wireless technology that uses terrestrial television, that part of the spectrum. So just remember, for everybody who grew up with sort of a TV antenna or rabbit ears, you could get a good signal. Well, now we can use unused parts of that spectrum for broadband. And we've partnered with another company. They've created now a device that is sort of the receiver. You just put it on the side of your house, and it can connect with an antenna that's 10 or 15 miles away. You then bring a cable into your house, and you have Wi-Fi at broadband speeds. This is what rural America needs. either with this kind of technology or some other, it's actually, I just think, of fundamental importance to put the entire country on a level playing field in terms of real economic growth.
Yeah, you can see how that would be life-changing, especially I think of a family with young kids. I think we also might have a shot inside the truck, a chance to give a little sense of what happens inside there.
Yeah, this was great. I had the opportunity to learn firsthand. Look, this also reflects, I think, the best of almost American do-it-yourself electronic engineering, because what you see there is a Windows laptop, and it is amazing what people with a little bit of financial support can go accomplish when you give them the ability to be creative. And that's what's happening in Ferry County. That is what is happening increasingly in rural counties across the country.
And Brad, some people have talked about COVID as sort of an x-ray on our society. You were way ahead on this issue, but I think we realize now with so much remote learning, what a massive life-changing imperative broadband becomes.
I think that's very true. I mean, look, right now, you actually can't go to school virtually in an effective way if you don't have access to broadband and you don't have a good computing device. There will obviously come a day when this pandemic will be behind us, when kids will be back in class in school buildings. But even when that happens, there's a huge homework gap that we need to close. And we need to live in a country where every student can access all the resources needed to do research, to do homework, to collaborate with other people. So even post-COVID, I think the importance of the broadband gap is not going to abate one bit. It will remain just as important to our future as it is right now.
By the way, Brad, you said two of the most beautiful words in the English language, two words I haven't heard in quite a while, and that is post-COVID. We've got a hope, right?
Well, look, I think this is a time to think not only about what we need to do now, but what we want to do next. And what we should be doing is not just rebuilding, but reimagining the kind of country in which we want to live. The day will come when this is behind us. None of us knows for certain when the day will arrive, but the sooner we start envisioning what we want to build, the more we can harness the free market, call on small businesses, give them what they need to succeed, I think the better off we're going to be as a nation.
So, Brad, you're not in Charlotte, but you have an exciting project going on there. You have a smart city initiative going on in Charlotte. And one of the big intentions of this investment was to help close the digital divide.
Yeah, Charlotte is an important city for Microsoft. North Carolina is an important state for us as a company because we have thousands of employees who work in Charlotte. They support people across the United States. We invested last year more than $20 million to expand our presence in Charlotte. We were adding over 200 new employees. And part of what we want to do is not just grow our employee presence, but really strengthen our commitment to the city and the state. And what we're doing in North Carolina is a part of what we're doing across the country. Specifically, we're bringing free digital learning opportunities to people perhaps especially who are looking either to find a new job, who may have lost their job, or just want to progress in their own career. So we've combined access to free resources online, low-cost tests and certifications so people can show employers what they've mastered. One of my favorite things through LinkedIn, which Microsoft owns, is we've created new courses. So if somebody wants to sort of get better about interviewing for a job through a PC, they can take a course on sort of tips on how to do a better job of interviewing. And then we even have artificial intelligence that will give people feedback about how they did. So people can practice and learn. And I think that's just one example of how we can put digital technology to work to frankly help people succeed in the current environment and add to the digital skills they're likely to need to be successful in the decade ahead.
Brad, I'm getting the hook here, but real quick, I want to squeeze this in as I read about the Charlotte project, what I was most excited about was smart transit. Can you just give us one sentence about smart transit?
Well, when you think about it, we live in a world where data can help us with almost everything we do. It can, help cities manage their transportation infrastructure. It can help individuals do a better job of avoiding traffic jams, at least in the days when people are driving more again and going back to the office. Just if you think about what it means to have a smart city. What we're all going to want, what we're going to see in the coming decade is a transportation infrastructure that is guided by data. And I think especially for the public sector to build and maintain a transportation network, this can be a game changer.
And Brad, as we say goodbye at the end of our newsletters, we always like to have one fun thing, end on a lighter note. And not many of us have had a guest off of a plane lately. You had an actual guest who got off an actual plane.
Well, I was really fortunate. My father came to visit in the Seattle area this past weekend. It was great to have a guest in the house. He lives in southeastern Wisconsin. We're all having to be very careful and be very safe. But at the same time, I think my father, my family, like so many American families, were yearning for a little bit of that normalcy that defined our lives before the year 2020 began.
Brad, for those who care about the internet and society and technology, we all do. Your Twitter feed is great. It's Brad Smith. And I should mention that your LinkedIn is also Brad Smith. And so Brad Smith of Microsoft, thank you very much for a great conversation.
Sure. BRADSMI. I look forward to connecting with people. Thank you, as always, Mike.
Great. Thank you for joining Axios. And now batting cleanup, the House Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy. As a Californian, he's very wired into the Silicon Valley community. He is a tech early adopter himself. He's the real deal, native Bakersfieldian, fourth generation from Kern County, grandson of a cattle rancher, son of a fireman, and as if he doesn't have enough titles already, for this week, he is chairman of the Republican National Convention. Mr. Leader, Mr. Chairman, welcome to Axios.
Thank you so much for having me. Glad to be back.
So does being chairman give you some great perks?
You got to work and do a lot, but I did get one big perk. I got this big gavel. So I like that. And I got a little gift.
And that's Reagan behind you, right?
That's Reagan behind me, and then some pictures of my family. I love Reagan. If you ever wondered what this painting of Reagan's in color and he's smiling, because if Reagan would tell conservatives anything, to be a happy conservative. If you believe your policies bring people more freedom and liberty, don't be angry about it, be happy about it. And I think that's coming forward in this convention this week. It's been very good.
It's good advice for all of us. I mentioned you're an early adopter, and early on in this pandemic, you ordered a couple of dozen fitness trackers. You found an innovative use for them. Do tell, do show.
Well, it is called a Whoop, WHOOP.com. It's a company, a wearable. But what I found with this, it measures your sleep, it measures everything about your body. But you can tell by your respiratory, the changing of your respiratory rate, and that's an early indication of COVID, even a couple days earlier than showing any symptoms. I wanted to get it for all my staff, but the Congress denied me that. So I got it for all my campaign. So the way to say, hey, if your respiratory rate moves 2 points, don't come into work that day, stay home. And it's a way that we can stay safer together. We're wearing masks and others, but how can we have any early indication of it? And this is one of the wearables that you can do it. PGA is
as we think about the way that the pandemic has changed our life, you have an opinion piece in the Financial Times talking about some of the real risk that the pandemic has exposed in America, a danger as overdependence on foreign supply. There's some things the government can do, tax incentives. What do you think business should do to help close that gap?
Well, when I was in business school, getting my MBA, we'd always study Malcolm Baldwin just in time, right? You want more efficiency and everything. But now we have to rethink that. How dependent have we become on China? And with China lying to the world and hoarding the PPE, what about the critical minerals? Like, we don't make penicillin, we don't make vitamins anymore. What about a national stockpile? I think we should rethink a stockpile. In the past, we would buy product and store it in some government facility thinking you're going to send it out. By the time you ever need it, it's expired, it's been there 20 years. Let's think differently. What if we go to business? And let's take an example. Say 3M makes 1 million masks a year. Why don't we pay them to make 1.2 million masks? They store it, and in the next year, they resell those masks and they put new, fresh ones in. Because in the world today, they can ship anything within 24 hours. So give the businesses an incentive to have it. And if you're already in China producing items, don't move to Vietnam. You should move to North America. The one thing I've learned from this pandemic of what we're going through, you could still truck things back and forth. And there are critical minerals and critical items that is too important to sit back. And I'm a free marketer, but I don't want to be dependent on anybody else, especially when it comes to America. So there are things we need to rethink to make sure we still have control here. And we're doing that when it comes to the vaccine and therapeutics, that you have to be able to make them in America and get those essential items here. Never again should we be dependent on some other country and those critical items that we need for our own health and security.
And one of the big factors that you point to in this overdependence is China. And we've seen what China has done in Hong Kong. How worried are you about what China's going to be doing with Taiwan?
I'm very scared about this. And it's not something because of COVID. Remember, 30 years ago, you watched 1 million kids go to Tiananmen Square. They build the goddess of democracy that looked like the Statue of Liberty across from the portrait of Mao. And you watched what China did, roll in the tanks. You watched that young man stand in front of the tank that was willing. We knew he was going to lose his life. We don't know who he is today because we know he's not alive. But he was willing to give that up for the idea of freedom. And when you think of America, we are more than a country, we are an idea that inspires people 30 years ago in Tiananmen Square, inspired people for millions in the last year in Hong Kong that would come out for crave the idea of freedom of speech, or the shipyard worker in Poland more than 30 years ago, or the individuals that tore down a wall that divided two Germanys. We're watching China use a crisis in the world that they created to expand their own beliefs. We watch what they're doing in the South China Sea. We're watching what they're doing now with shooting missiles. We watch they build islands, say they weren't going to weaponize them, and they do. We watch what they have stolen from us in the past, the IB. Now we're watching the FBI tell us that they want to influence our election to actually elect Joe Biden. So I think China should be a critical element of what this election is about. But I went a year ago to the speaker and asked that, could we put a bipartisan committee together? Same number of Republicans, same number of Democrats, not just looking at IP theft, but could we have one American strategy for what we're doing for the next 100 years? Because China does. In China, if you want to fly somewhere, you may have the money, but they won't sell it to you simply because it's what you have said or family members. They give you a social score, and they're going to put that on everybody. And if the NBA won't stand up to them, what's going to happen in the future? So I think from one perspective, we need one plan as Americans on what we're going to do with China. And I think all the allies would join us based upon COVID.
I mentioned at the top that you have close relations with the Silicon Valley, an issue that you were early on. You were concerned about censorship of conservatives. How do you think that the big tech companies are doing in trying to assuage the fears in Washington? Washington definitely has the Valley in its sights. What's the advice you're giving those companies?
They're doing worse than they were before. They're letting politics run it instead of the fairness of the business. They now have Democrats and Republicans very concerned. Their power is only getting larger. And in the world of COVID, it's getting larger because they have more influence. But I don't think they're forthcoming in a lot. I have real concerns of what Google has been doing. And I think you're going to hit a point. I've warned them time and again. You're going to hit a point where people are going to say you're a monopoly. If 90% of every search on the internet goes through Google and you can control what people see and what people say, and you want to influence an election, I don't think you're going to be able to maintain. If you're on the second page of Google and 90% of it drops off, you got a real problem. If you're directing what's driving to sites and others, you're going to have a problem that people are going to think they're going to have to level the playing field. And I see a concern on both sides of the aisle. So I think they need to rethink what they're doing right now.
So it sounds like you strongly think that there is regulatory, legal, legislative action coming big tech's way.
Yeah, and there's two different ways to handle this, which I disagree with what the Democrats want to do. They want to regulate it like it's a utility, and then we get no innovation, nothing else. I want to have a competitive playing field, right? I mean, when you look at what Amazon's able to do, you know who should have been Amazon? Sears. They had the catalog, they sold you everything, but they failed. But competition proves something better. What I see now from this big tech is they're not allowing competition to come up. And we see that time and again from their practices. That's where government really should come in, because technology improves every single day. I mean, before Google, there was Yahoo and other search engines, right? And government came in and actually allowed Google to move up. But now Google goes out and kind of quashes many times that we found any new small company from rising up. That's a place that we should really look at and make sure there is a level playing field, there's competition, and somebody's not controlling the market, but utilizing it to control what people see and what people think.
And so just to put a bow on this, you're saying that Washington is more concerned about the tech companies than they were a year ago.
Well, yeah, tech companies control more every single day. Think about it, from Instagram, from Google, from a search, from YouTube, from Facebook. Those sound like four big companies. No, those are only two companies. But they're controlling so much of our life and so much of what we see and know. And in a world of COVID, you're relying on technology more because you're not going out. That's concerning to me and everybody else. And then the influence of what they're trying to do to make people on what you say. They're determining now what free speech is. I haven't seen them ban China and what China does, but they want to ban what Americans think or say in a free speech world. I think they're overstepping their bounds, and I watched that time and again with Twitter.
All right, Mr. Weeder, as we say goodbye, I'm going to ask you a question about human nature, and I'm going to give you examples. So my nephew Morgan works in a coffee bar, and he says that when you put a coffee in someone's hand, they don't even have to drink it. They're suddenly friendlier. They're nicer. It's purely psychological. At age 21, you started your first business, Kevin O's Deli. Tell me something you learned about human nature there that serves you as you campaign for House candidates, House members this fall.
It'd be very interesting. You know, I won the lottery. I invested. I took that money and opened a deli. I took a risk, right? Well, there are three lessons I learned. You're the first to work, last to leave, last to be paid. You're going to listen more because it's the customer. You're going to find ways to constantly improve every single day. But in the business of service, you connect with somebody, right? They trust you because they're providing their hard work money to purchase something from you. They want to make sure the quality is at that higher level. They want to make sure you surpass expectations. And you want to be able to take them almost to a different place, have them try something in a sandwich. Some of my sandwiches are still around in other delis in Bakersfield today. They call it the McCarthy. It was turkey, cream cheese, and artichoke hearts, something that I never had ever made before. And it wasn't something that I knew would be good. I just wanted to try something new and expand somebody's taste. But if they asked for something, I showed up on time. I made the quality better, and I made a connection with them that they knew my name. I put my name on the business, Kevin O's. So if they had a complaint, they knew who to come to. That build, that trust, the respect that you had for one another has never left me. And the most important part, you're willing to serve somebody. I still go back today and I'll work behind the counter in other businesses because I think the ability to serve somebody, regardless of their wealth, regardless of the color of skin or gender, says something about the character of who you are.
Mr. Weeder, Mr. Chairman, we look forward to your speech tonight, and thank you for joining Axios.
All right. It's over.
Touche. We're adjourned. Thank all of you for joining this series. Thank Microsoft for these conversations about the future of employability. We appreciate your joining us in the two-part series. And huge shout out to the Axios events team. Incredible 2 weeks back-to-back of convention programming that they pulled off. Most grateful to them. So thank Microsoft, thank you all, and look forward to seeing you on Axios.com.